Joining us now is friend of the show and TRM Labs Global Head of Policy and Government Affairs, Ari Redford. Hello, Ari.
I am so happy to be joining you both today. Thank you so much. It's great to see you guys.
We are so happy to see your face as well. We're going to dive right into this. Talk to us about the Beacon Network. Maybe for the audience, just lay a foundation for us. What is it? How is it going to work?
Absolutely. And thank you. So basically, since 2023, we've seen about 50 billion in scams and fraud within the crypto ecosystem. As we've talked about before, still a tiny, tiny number compared to overall activity within the growing crypto space. But still existential. It means the loss of life savings for people. And we've said to ourselves, how do we stop this? And the way we stop it is by interdicting the funds that have been stolen. And that can get funds back to victims. And that can also be a deterrent for bad actors who are trying to use crypto to commit scams and fraud and other types of illicit activity. So what we realized is that like one firm, whether it's a blockchain intelligence firm like TRM or like an exchange like Coinbase, can't do this on its own. So we said, all right, like who are the Avengers within the crypto ecosystem? We want everyone in this. So to your point in terms of the lead, we reached out to Coinbase and Binance first. And they were really all in on this. We then brought on PayPal and Stripe and Robinhood. Ripple is a huge part of what we're doing. Exchanges like OKX and Kraken, Zodiac Custody. And then we said to ourselves, all right, well, who are the best investigators in the world? And in many cases, that's global law enforcement. So think sort of the largest leading law enforcement agencies across the globe, but also people like ZachXBT on Twitter, who is arguably one of the best investigators in the crypto ecosystem. Zero Shadow, right? Firms that are doing this, individuals that are doing this. And what they're able to do is they're able to flag addresses that are engaged in illicit activity, illicit transactions, and alert this network. Think of it as a lighthouse, right? Sending that beacon, sending that alert so that exchanges know that illicit funds are moving and interdict them. So while we think of public-private partnerships oftentimes as these static, groups of people sitting around a table or something, coordinating, this is real-time alerting and interdiction network. And we've brought as many folks across the crypto ecosystem, and it's growing. It's really exciting to see the momentum around it. We announced it last week, and we're already sort of onboarding new members.
I have a quick follow-up for you, Ari. Previously, I think the message here was if you're self-custodying and you lose your crypto, there is no recourse for you. It's gone. Is this a solution to that? Is this the answer to folks saying, I have a bank account. If the money from my bank account gets lost, the bank is going to pay me back?
It's certainly slightly different, right? What we're seeing in crypto and why the promise of cryptocurrency is cross-border value transfer at the speed of the internet. But bad actors are now able to move funds faster and in larger amounts than ever before. However, what Beacon really does is stops funds from being off-ramped. So if someone steals, your individual funds in a fraud or scam type situation or a hack, we've seen a record-setting year for hacks in 2025. Already about 2.5 billion. Much of that was in the 1.5 billion Bybit hack. So what we need to do is we need to essentially close the crypto ecosystem to bad actors who are trying to off-ramp those funds. And oftentimes it becomes a race. And that race is now real time. It's 24/7. Threat actors are not working 9 to 5. They're not taking weekends off. So we need to have automated alerting to those exchanges so you can off-ramp the funds wherever they're stolen from.
You said a minute ago you gathered the Avengers. I don't know if that makes you Captain America, Ari.
I am nowhere near good looking enough to be Captain America, Renato. He does not have this head.
He's always been my favorite Avenger for what it is worth. But in all seriousness, there's a lot of illicit activity that may increase as crypto grows, right, and becomes more popular. One thing that I'm interested in is sort of tension between anonymity and privacy and obviously illicit activity on the other side, right? In terms of trying to strike a proper balance in fighting illicit activity versus privacy. This, I think, was crystallized in the recent Tornado Cash prosecution. how do you answer those who say that actually they're not able to conduct transactions in a way that ensures privacy to them because there's all this public tracking and working together to try to find potential wrongdoing?
It's such an important question, and to me, the most important conversation going on within the crypto ecosystem today. The DeFi Education Fund put out a letter a few days ago, which I think was absolutely critical to the conversation. And I think the challenge for regulators and law enforcement and others is how do we thread that needle between ensuring that lawful users have the privacy that they need to engage in an open financial system, and yet stop bad actors like North Korea from taking advantage of the promise of cryptocurrency. And I think that's really what Beacon is focused on. We're not associating individuals, and never have, with their alphanumeric crypto addresses or activity. We're only focused on illicit actors. And I think as long as governments are focused on the actual bad actors, not those who are either building or leveraging technology, then I think that's exactly how we do that balance. We need to use technology, zero knowledge proofs, digital ID, to ensure privacy and the ability to transact privately. But we also need to use every tool we have in the toolbox to go after illicit actors. Because look, if we can continue, if bad actors like North Korea and other can steal and off ramp billions of dollars from the crypto ecosystem, then none of this really works at the end of the day, when people can get their funds stolen at the speed of the internet. So I think we really need to do that balancing. And Beacon is specifically built to go after bad actors on that race to the off ramps in real time.
So I understand that Beacon is focused on stopping funds at centralized exchange off ramps. Talk to me a little bit about how you're thinking about some of the more complex tools, like using DeFi protocols, cross-chain bridges, mixers, like Renato just mentioned. How does that come into play?
Absolutely. And I think one of the coolest things about Beacon is we have, there are a number of, they're in the release, 1inch, Rhino, a whole bunch of other DeFi players that are part of the Beacon network. We have bridges, right? Because they have this unique capability to stop funds from going across that bridge, from engaging with that DeFi protocol. It's a different system, right? You have those centralized exchanges where everything is going through large compliance teams, right? Places like Binance and Coinbase and Kraken have compliance teams that are the size of many banks. And those are the people who are triaging those alerts, who are looking at all these things. In DeFi, it's much more automated, right? We're going through that protocol, through that smart contract. So DeFi is an absolutely critical piece of the overall puzzle. I will say that, Beacon, and this is why regulation has long been focused on centralized exchanges, because bad actors still need those off ramps to convert those funds from crypto to fiat, to actually use them for weapons proliferation, for destabilizing activity, for any kind of day-to-day commerce. That may change at some point. It likely will. But today, it's those off ramps where the most vulnerability is. And what's so cool about Beacon is, look, I mean, the overwhelming amount of lawful activity is flowing through Beacon members today. So what we've really been able to do is create that defensive mechanism, so just bad actors are not able to off ramp those funds.
One issue that Jen alluded to previously is I would say, increasing crime, including violent crime, related to private keys and obtaining private keys. Obviously, there's been some significant cases recently. There's concern that the Genius Act, rise of stablecoins, could lead to more of that if people are moving more of their wealth out of fiat currency and putting it into, for example, stablecoins. Are you concerned about the rise of crime associated with obtaining private keys to get access to people's tokens?
It's a great question, and I think it's ultimately a good thing. All of this, right? What this shows is the crypto ecosystem is growing and really flourishing, and bad actors gravitate to where the money is. I think I said this something last time, and you used it as a clip, and I saw all kinds of people commenting. But I think the reality is the ecosystem is growing, and lawful activity is growing, and so is illicit activity. I am particularly disturbed by these so-called wrench attacks, these violent crimes associated with crypto that you're describing. I was a prosecutor for a long time, and one thing that a lot of people don't know is that the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., where I was for about 11 years, is also the prosecutor of local crime there. So I did homicides and sex offenses and robberies and these types of things. And to see the marrying of this type of violence with cybercrime, where you can then move those funds at the speed of the internet, is harrowing to me. And someone who's involved in this space, as are you guys, it really hits home. But I would say that, like, even in those violent crime cases, we're working with compliance teams and others to track and trace the flow of those funds, ultimately to do things that we would never be able to do if in a robbery where someone's taking your cash or your iPhone or something like that. There's a great case involving Coinbase's global intelligence team where they used TRM actually to track and trace funds that were stolen in a robbery, a very brutal robbery in North Carolina, that ultimately led to the sense of 47-year sentence for the ringleader of this violent crime ring. So there are things that we could do that we never could before. It's certainly disturbing. We're going to see more illicit activity, but it's going to become a smaller and smaller portion overall because the ecosystem is growing so fast.
Ari, I want to take a question from our comments section here from Matt Shank, who says he has to run, but maybe he can watch this afterwards. He says, who determines bad actors? And I imagine the answer there is, people who steal things, if I were to simplify that down. But if I can elaborate maybe on his question, how do you ensure that good actors aren't accidentally flagged and their funds are frozen?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely critical. And that's why legal process is such an important part of this puzzle, right? Law enforcement is investigating a case. They ultimately have to go through a legal process to go to that exchange and ultimately identify that address and potentially block or freeze those funds. One piece to Beacon, which is so cool, and some of it is happenstance and timing. We were building Beacon just as the White House was putting out its 160-page report, and while the discussion draft for the market structure bill came out of Senate banking. And if you recall the discussion draft, there's a number of pages of that bill that are dedicated to the idea of putting together essentially the public-private partnership that Beacon is today. And in all of this, there's a ton of focus on ensuring privacy, ensuring rights of lawful users, ensuring due process. One thing that Treasury suggests, or the White House suggests in that 160-page report, is this idea of a hold law. And that's essentially to give the exchanges the time that they need to investigate, to ensure that we're talking about illicit activity, that we're talking about ransomware, hacks, scams and fraud, right? Existential threats, terrorist financing, child sexual abuse material, darknet markets, and ensure that someone isn't caught up unfairly. So our hope is that, like, hey, there's a hold law. Let's look at this for a day. And I know people need to move fast and they want to move their funds, but in certain cases where law enforcement is involved, I think a hold law could be very valuable, and it should be very, very guardrailed, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, to ensure exchanges have the time they need, but that consumers are very, very well protected. I can just say that privacy is top of mind all the time when we're thinking about how to do what we do at TRM. An incredibly important piece of the puzzle is to protect developers in all of this.
Ari, as always, it was a pleasure having you on the
That's
show.
it? We're done?
That's it. I know we ran out of time, but as you know, you're welcome back anytime. You are
I am in.
a best friend of the show.
You two are two of my favorite people. Love the conversations. And so thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Ari. That was TRM Labs Global Head of Policy, Ari Redford.